First of all, thank you all for joining me today to talk about all things BoJack Horseman, and specifically the Emmy-nominated episode Free Churro. Before we get started, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. I'm Raphael Bob-Waksberg. I'm the creator and showrunner of the show, as well as the writer of the episode Free Churro.
I'm Michael Hollingsworth. I'm the supervising director of BoJack.
I'm Amy Winfrey. I was the director of the episode.
Okay, thank you so much. When did the idea of having what's essentially an episode-long monologue first come up, and who was the first person who suggested it? Who gets to claim that title?
Well, I'm the only writer in this interview, so I'll take full credit.
Nice.
But it probably came out of the writer's room. Every season, when we work on the show, one thing we talk about early on when we're breaking the season, figuring out the season is, what kind of episodes do we want to do this year? Are there any different kinds of things that we haven't done before? And I really enjoy a challenge or something that pushes the form of what we do or makes us think about the story in a new way. And so the idea of doing an episode that was one long monologue was really interesting to me. And so that kind of came first with the form of it, the idea that we were going to do an episode that was just BoJack talking for 20 odd minutes. And then from there, we talked about, okay, well, what are stories that would justify that format? Why would he be talking for a long time? And what could we do to make the episode feel special, that it feels like, okay, you're not just watching BoJack, on the phone ranting at a customer service representative. Although we've also done an episode about that. What would make it feel like, oh yeah, this merits the time we're giving it. And his relationship with his mother is something that was very fraught, particularly in the previous season 4. And so it felt like that would justify doing an episode like that.
Yeah, I remember Raphael had been talking about that for a few seasons. And when he was initially talking about it, you kept saying you wanted to do a whole episode where it was a monologue in one solid shot with no cuts. and what would that be like? And I just kept thinking of the storyboards in the overseas studios. Like, I'm sure you have a lot of listeners who are actual animators, and to have like a 25-minute file, like one...
Yeah.
One long scene file.
I've definitely encountered problems with a 3-minute file, and all the animators shooting dagger looks at me when I walk by when they're fixing that up on the back end. So, yeah.
That would have been maybe too much.
Yeah. We got pretty close. There was an episode that Amy directed where Diane and BoJack are having a long conversation after...
Yeah. Was that 3 minutes long, that take?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was a little break in the middle.
The overseas studio had to, even though there was no cuts in the whole scene, the overseas studio had to break it up into like 5 files.
Yeah.
And just like sew it back together and edit. And I remember when I was talking to Raphael when he was initially wanting to do one in just one long cut, all I could keep thinking of is like he'd have to keep returning to a home base, a home pose.
So we could make secret cuts, invisible cuts.
Yeah, like in Rope, like the Hitchcock movie or whatever.
Well, that's what I don't understand, because I feel like in animation, it's very easy to do those invisible cuts, because you can just place the flash puppet in an identical pose, right? Or is it not as easy as that?
It wouldn't be. It's just the longer the file gets, just the heavier it gets.
But it's true.
You could break it up.
You could break it up, yeah.
But we didn't.
Yeah.
But I think, like I said, I love a challenge. I think one thing that we've really been praised for on the show is some of our lush animation sequences and our background gags and side characters, as well as the rat-a-tat dialogue. So to limit ourselves and take away all of those tools felt like a fun challenge for both us on the writing side and on the animation side.
And we're one of the few shows that has rat-a-tat dialogue with actual rats.
Real rats. They're really catting each other.
This is great. I want to come back to the script and kind of like cracking the story and how you came about that. But since we're talking about sort of the animation side of things, because of the complications, the difficulties that this extended monologue kind of poses, like you just talked about, did you ever think about or suggest maybe doing more flashback sequences with a narration over it, or any kind of ways to break it up so that it would make it a little easier on the animators and also not just be kind of this bottle episode, which you never get to see for animation for different reasons?
Yeah, when we first started looking at the script, we were a little concerned, can we pull this off? But then we went to the table read and heard Will Arnett actually do the script, and it seemed so compelling that at that moment I felt like, let's just go for this. Let's not even see the organist, because that was a discussion as well. Like, do we want to see the one other character that's in the room? But it seemed like a fun challenge to avoid that and to kind of.
I remember at our pre-sum meeting at the beginning, I offered, if you think it's going to get boring, you can maybe show some of these flashbacks that he's describing, and you really said, I'd like to try to not. I think we can not do it, and I think the challenge then was making his face interesting the whole way through. And I was really excited when I found out Amy was directing this episode, because she's done episodes before that have been very character focused, like the one you did the BoJack and Princess Carolyn at the restaurant episode, right? That was yours? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there were moments in that it's just the two of them talking in a restaurant where really you want to just look at their faces and these subtle micro expressions, these subtle changes. And so this felt like a good opportunity to have an episode full of that, to really just be about how much can we convey visually with this animated character making different faces.
Yeah. If you Google BoJack, mostly that one face he makes in this episode comes up as like the top result. A face that kind of Amy and her team was writing the boards and went right through.
That was drawn by Peter Merriman, my husband.
Which face is that? He's doing the toy dinosaur impression of his mother.
Yeah, if you Google BoJack now, that's like the number one image result.
Ironically, he would hate that in real life.
It's like it does thing.
Yeah, it does kind of come around. Like the shows become real life. He hates that when his sneezing picture, that when people talk about him on the news, they throw up this sneezing picture, and then in real life now, if you Google him, that awful picture comes up. Life imitates art.
Since you mentioned hearing Arnett's kind of table read and knowing that, you had a good solid foundation to kind of start from and that this was going to work, how much of his performance was directly from your script and how much of it was him kind of maybe playing around in the recording booth a little bit or back and forth collaboration?
Very little. I mean, we do a little bit of improv on the show, but not much. The episode's structurally, it's scripted pretty tightly. And he has a lot of leeway in his performance of when to pause and when, how to emphasize certain things. But it was mostly as scripted, and we really didn't do that many takes. I mean, this is such a behemoth of an episode to record in one sitting. Usually we'll have an actor in, and there'll be, half of like 3 scenes, and we'll get it done in like 20 minutes. I mean, Will usually has more than our average actor because he's a big part of every episode, but this was just, we knew if we got like 5 to 7 takes of every paragraph, it would go all day. So I really just kind of let him go, and he just did it. I don't want to say cold, I think he worked on it a little on his own. But he, similar to the table read, he kind of read through it and he would go for like a couple pages, and then I'd say, okay, you want to go back and maybe try a different version of some of that? And he'd go, oh yeah, this part I didn't really nail, I'll do that again. He took very little direction. It really is his interpretation of the script, and I think he really felt it and connected with it, having played the character for this long and this many years, and understanding that relationship that he has with his mother and also with himself and the other things he talked about. And so I really just kind of let him be, and I don't think I gave much direction at all.
It's a real tour de force performance. He won an Annie Award for it, for his performance, and this is a guy who's done a ton of voiceover. He's Batman and all these other kind of memorable characters, and this is his performance that he won his first Annie Award for voiceover.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into the awards talk in a little bit, maybe to close the conversation out. But before that, did he have to come back to do any ADR? Was there anything you guys wanted to kind of punch up or work on after the fact? No?
I don't think so. I think what you're hearing is from that first day.
Yeah, it's really interesting and fun working on a 5th season of a show versus a first season. As far as ADR and making those noises, we have such a library
of BoJack grunts
of
and
noises.
whines and whinnies. Yeah.
Yeah, at this point. I've read stuff about The Simpsons, and they have the same thing. Like, if they need Homer to make some particular... Like, they have does, like a whole rainbow.
Of does. A rain dough.
Like, he does... They have it in every emotion, like every possible thing. Like, what if he's in Ireland and he's faking an Irish accent and he does a dough or something?
I also think generally, I haven't worked on other animated shows. That's not true. I've worked on a couple, but I haven't worked on other animated shows that I'm not the executive producer of. So I don't know how it normally goes. But generally, we don't do a lot of ADR. We do a couple pickups here and there. But I think on other animated shows they do a lot of reworking in the boards, and they if jokes aren't working, they'll try to beat them and they'll bring the actors back in. And we generally don't do that as much. I think part of the reason is our scripts are very long. We record long, and almost every episode has like 3 minutes more of material than we can afford to animate. Mm-hmm. And so if a joke isn't working, we just cut it out and squeeze the episode. And so we're always kind of taking things away and making it tighter and tighter and tighter. We're not necessarily looking to replace stuff with other things.
There was one instance this season, I don't think it's a spoiler, the season working on now, where I wanted to pitch a particular joke that Alison Brie would deliver a line with her mouth full, because I just thought it would be, because they were eating and then she's like caught off guard, and I thought it would be funny if she answered with a mouthful of food. And so I went to Raphael. I was like, can you please bring Alison Brie back in so she can pretend she has a mouthful of food to record this line?
Right. And that's the kind of thing that, like, we did because she was coming in anyway to record another episode. Yeah. But if it was like a guest actress or something, and we only managed to get that one time. Yeah. I was like, I'm not gonna call like Angelica Houston's agent. Yeah. She's gonna come back and she can say the line again with a sandwich in her mouth.
Jumping back to the script again for a little bit, because honestly, there's a ton of focus on it in this particular episode. Was this kind of like, I don't know how it normally works or if it was different for this specific episode, but was this an all hands on deck kind of situation, or was it, Raphael, very much kind of from the beginning?
Yeah, no, I would say it's every script is all hands on deck as far as the writers are concerned. I mean, we break every episode in the room together. We talk about the story. We talk about the different beats of the story. In this case, we hunted down an old episode of Maude, which we reference in the episode, where she's just talking to her therapist for the whole half hour, and that was really instructive to talk about, to look at like, how did they structure this monologue? And we kind of saw like, like a normal episode of Maude, there is an A story and a B story and a C story here. It's just she's telling all the stories. And so she'll talk about this for a little bit, and then she'll kind of get distracted and wander over to this area of the room and talk about that. And that was really helpful in thinking of the structure of the episode. Like, okay, we're going to have this A story here, which is BoJack's mother before she died told BoJack, "I see you," and that's going to kind of be his home base, and he's going to keep coming back to that. But meanwhile, he's going to talk about other stuff. He's going to talk about his father's death, and he's going to talk about his relationship with show business. And there's other things we're kind of sprinkling in, but it's helpful to kind of know we had some recurring themes or stories that on a regular episode would be their own scenes or sequences, but in this it was just conversational. So we kind of broke it out like a normal episode of the show, and then I went off and wrote it. And I'd been writing, I wrote a book of short stories recently. And I guess I was writing it at the same time as this season. And so I was kind of used to that form of just one narrator or one person talking for paragraphs at a time. And I'd done a live show here in LA where I'd had different readers read some of my stories out loud. So I had a good sense of how many pages it took to make about 25 minutes of talking time. So that was helpful, because otherwise the script format wouldn't really help in the same way, because it's such a different thing. And so as I was writing it, I would then take breaks and read the whole thing out loud myself and make sure I wasn't going way too long or way too short. Because that was a fear that I'd write this thing and then it'd record, it'd be like 12 minutes. But how did that go so fast? I thought there was more. Or that it would be like 45 minutes.
We would have filled it in with animal jokes.
Oh, yeah. We would have found background gags. A lot of... we would have gotten that rainbow of Homer dough and put them in.
when I was going to board it, I was aware of this sort of change in these sort of like Raphael was saying, how they kind of shifted focus to these different stories. And I tried to change the angle at that time just to kind of also give it a formal break.
Yeah.
And keep you kind of engaged. So we would turn to like an angle that has Beatrice's casket in it, just, to weight that heavily toward Beatrice, that sort of thing, just to reflect what he'd written.
Yeah, and that was great too, because it kind of did draw, like, Arnett's performance keeps you focused obviously on it, but the way the animation, the angle of the camera kind of changes, that keeps you kind of drawn in and kind of unable to look away, for better or worse. This episode, it feels like it kind of uncorked a bottle of like a lifetime of pain that BoJack had been holding on to, but it also at the same time feels like it kind of reveals BoJack when he's at his worst. So kind of the sympathetic side of him, and also like this not villainous, but just kind of jerk side of him. So was there any difficulty in finding the balance in the script, or was it just kind of more of a turn on that emotional faucet and just let all that stuff come out?
Yeah, I think it was very organic. I mean, we don't put a lot of thought necessarily into. Occasionally we do, like, is BoJack becoming too much of a jerk ass here? Versus are we feeling bad for him? But I think not so much in this episode. It's interesting to hear you describe it that way, because I have a tremendous amount of empathy for him in this episode. And I think the things he's saying are, yes, I guess in the context of a person speaking at his mother's funeral, are perhaps inappropriate. But I think in the context of what our audience understands about his relationship with his mother and, all he's done to get to this place, it's not a concern I had for this episode that we would lose the audience, or they would hate him for what he's saying or what he's doing here. I mean, they've gone with this far. He's done much worse things than speak ill of his dead mother.
Something else that I think is a strength of the show, and not just in this episode, but I mean all the episodes you've made so far, and I'm sure the episodes to come, is that sometimes something that happens in the story will kind of hit you in an unexpected way. And obviously that's going to be different for everybody who's watching it, but sometimes even the jokes hit close to home for certain people. So, for example, BoJack's last line in this particular episode reveals that he's been giving this eulogy for 20-some minutes to the wrong funeral parlor, which I thought was a great stinger kind of at the end of it. But without dragging the mood down too much, I actually had a very similar experience kind of happen to me. So while I was...
No kidding.
Yeah, while I was kind of laughing at that and was like, oh, that's a great thing, it also kind of like, sucker punched me too at the same time. So I'm wondering...
Well, hold on. Can you tell us about your very similar experience? I'm very curious.
I mean, like I said, I didn't want to depress everybody, but essentially a couple months before this episode aired, my grandfather had passed away, and it was out of state. So I traveled, to see the family and go to the service, and our wires got crossed. I ended up at the wrong funeral home, which was the same name, just a different location in this small town. And I kind of walked in on a family who was having a memorial service for their newborn baby who had just passed away. And that was one of the most mortifying things, maybe, in my life. Because what do you do in that moment? You're not prepared for that, ever.
So heavy.
Yeah, so it was a little heavy. But honestly, that moment in BoJack was kind of... It caught me off guard, but it also was nice at the same time. Because I was just kind of like, okay, we can laugh about that and get over that, yeah.
Good. Well, I'm very sorry for your loss and for that other loss.
Everyone's lost at this point. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I'm just so sorry that life is so cruel in general.
Yeah, those twists. You never see them coming.
Well, beats the alternative.
That's true.
That is true. But that kind of does feed into my question. How much of BoJack's experiences, how much of the other characters' experiences, I don't know if you can really put a number on it, but how much of that is pulled directly from the writers, the creative teams, kind of like their own painful personal experiences as far as like catharsis? And how much of it is you guys kind of theorizing like maybe like a worst case scenario at times?
Well, I have to say that is a Raphael question, but I will just interject. Raphael has written and supervised the writing of some of the darkest shit that has ever been done in animation.
Yeah.
But he also is the voice of Charlie Witherspoon, this goofy frog, and that is basically him.
What do you mean? mean that's basically me? How is that basically me?
I saw you fall off a yoga ball once.
That's true. Charlie's penchant for unintentional physical comedy is very autobiographical. I said recently, I just did a Reddit AMA, and someone asked me which character would I most relate to. And I said a little bit BoJack, a little bit Diane, but mostly Charlie Witherspoon, because like him, I also believe that being a boss is hard, and I also don't like getting yelled at, and that's just something that people need to understand about me. Those lines were very autobiographical, and when we were doing whatever episode those were in, we were doing the cut of it, and it was 3 minutes over. And the editor was saying, we could cut this line about how Charlie doesn't like getting yelled at. I was like, no. That is the heart and soul of this show.
Yeah, the whole series.
The whole series. It's very important our audience connects to this moment. So I think this will really speak to a lot of people who also don't like getting yelled at. But to answer your question, I think I'd say very little of it is plot-wise autobiographical to me and the writers, but maybe some parts of it are emotionally autobiographical, or we can extrapolate off of how we feel about certain things or situations or relationships and kind of build from there. It is very much like this logic machine that we've built up of like, okay, we have this character now, and we've seen how this character reacts to stuff. So therefore, if we put this character in this situation, bing, bong, boom, bom, boom. Follow the ping pong ball as it bounces around this domino rally.
I would say the show too is like more. It's like autobiographical of society today. There's not a lot of shows, not a lot of cartoons where BoJack is reacting to the Me Too era. He's reacting to gun violence. He's reacting to a lot of the things that are happening in our society.
Are you implying this is the first satirical cartoon show?
No, like that's reacting in somewhat real time.
Well, Amy has worked on South Park, so I don't know if Amy would agree with that.
We could react to things overnight.
Yeah, I don't know if we can beat that.
There was also Mary Worth.
Yes, Mary Worth was very topical.
Okay, so I guess my point is that this is just another show.
Please give us an Emmy. Like other shows before us, we also do this thing.
But certainly there are a lot of moments that, the script arrives to me like fully formed, but I would relate to things that are in that script, and it would help me inform the acting and what's going on in that. And that was a good part of BoJack.
I'm curious actually, when you guys board the characters or animate it, like how often do you like look in a mirror or like record yourself making faces or think about like, how would I say this line, or how do my eyebrows move?
I have a wonderful assistant director this season, Chris Nance, and he does that all the time.
Really?
He has recorded himself doing one-armed
somersault.
Not somersaults. What is it?
Cartwheels?
Cartwheel.
Winter
yeah. I've seen him dancing around.
Uh-huh.
I've observed you giggling and dancing around.
True. For Charlie Witherspoon move.
It's very interesting because I always want to get up and get physical too. I do it with our editors when we're like, I'm just looking around. Me and Raphael do it a lot in edit too, where because me and Raphael came from live performance comedy,
right? And
I just stand up and put a hand out,
right?
And I don't even think about it. It's like, get up and join me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's act this out. And then it's kind of, my favorite collaborator is another one of our directors, Aaron Long, because I know like I can fall on him and like grab him around the waist and shake him and everything to like try to like go like, this is what they need to do. Like
I feel like I'm going to hear this like on a witness stand.
I know.
Like evidence number one.
I've had awkward moments where I've been like, Sextina Aquafina, she put her leg up like this on the table, and I'd be like, ooh, this is a little weird. Sorry, storyboard artist.
But yeah, like that. But that brings us back to Chris Nance. Like I just love. I came down there and he has his iPhone out and he was recording himself doing all of these acrobatics and stuff. And I was like, this is what I want everybody to be doing. I just love it so much. I was like, it's hard to like express how much I appreciate him without seeming like I'm singling him out and like making a spectacle of him.
Look at this dancing monkey.
But yeah, we try to do that.
So the movements are very autobiographical.
Yeah, I mean, I can recognize a board artist acting.
Really?
Like, it's very
That's
obvious
funny.
to me who has boarded a scene by how they're holding their hands, what they're doing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is very clear.
And I was in a meeting with Amy just recently. I was like, and you know what I want here? You know what I always want in every situation like this? And she's like, you want him to wring his hands? Like, where you kind of rub your hand over the knuckles of
like
your
I
other
say,
hand?
I can recognize everybody's scene.
I think hand wringing, it says a lot. When you're sitting there kind of wringing your hands, you're like, oh, I'm like really in my head.
I had to make an edict halfway through this season, which is now become a strong moratorium on finger quoting, because I noticed that oftentimes when a character was talking for a while and they emphasized a certain word, or they had some sort of feeling about a certain word, the go-to was always, give him a little finger quote. People don't use finger quotes that often.
Finger quotes are a favorite move of the modern American storyboarder. And I was joking with Raphael and Amy that one day in one scene, a character is going to reference so many things in a row that he just keeps finger quoting, and he just starts lifting up off the ground and fly away with his finger quotes.
You are all absolutely delightful, by the way. Before I run out of time with you, I definitely want to talk the Emmy nomination. So you're up for an Emmy for this particular episode, but you guys already won an Annie Award, a Critics' Choice Award this year. So what would an Emmy mean to you and the creative team, and then how would that compare to maybe getting, say, a free churro?
Well, a free churro you can eat. Yeah, we could have the elusive K or Ace. I guess Ace Award is something else. Right? Annie, Critics' Choice, Emmy. That's what everyone wants.
Perfect.
It sounds good.
Well, what would that actually mean to you and the creative team? Since you've been nominated before, but this could be your first win. So what would that mean to you guys?
Well, we've actually never been nominated as a show for an Emmy. Kristen Shaw was nominated for her voice work a few years back. That's our sole Emmy nomination prior to this. So it's very exciting to be nominated. What does it mean? It's always nicer to be nominated than not nominated, and it's always nicer to win than to not win. My general feeling about award shows that I've been to in the past is always that, when you win, it's a great time. What a joy. You're celebrating there. And when you lose, the whole thing feels very stupid. And like, why does anyone care about any of this? This is boring. I want to go home. And we've lost many things many times, so I'm well practiced in that. But it's exciting. I think it's good, right?
Raphael, will you rent a tux?
I probably will rent a tux. Yeah, which I usually don't.
At the last Critics' Choice Awards, which we've won 3 times, Raphael became late in his pajamas.
Yeah. The thing about the Critics' Choice was we didn't win the previous year, so I thought our streak had ended because we'd won twice in a row, I think, and then we lost. And so I was like, all right, well, it's over for us. Who cares? This is going to be boring. But then we won. It's like, what a great show. What a fun, how nice to be honored by the critics. Yeah. But also at the Critics' Choice Awards, you don't give a speech if you win for Best Animated Show. Yeah. So it didn't matter what I wore. At the Creative Arts Emmys, where we're nominated, I think I will give a speech if we win, right? It will just not be televised.
Yes, I think it's televised on FXX.
Oh, great. I got to tell my grandmother. Tune in.
Yeah.
If we lose, don't bother, Grandma.
But yes, Raphael is, listen, he's what does he need this for? He's one of America's top typewriter dudes, people.
Typewriter dudes? Top writer?
Top writer.
Oh, okay.
But if we win, I will take this Emmy. I will mount to the hood of my car, and I will drive through my old high school and aim the Emmy at my enemies.
You're very sharp.
Yes.
Amy, what about you?
I mean, it's shiny. And that's always good.
That's always good?
Seems like for making juice.
Yeah, you can really
juice.
Oh,
man. Yeah. It seems like you get a real good.
If you win an Emmy, are you going to demand people start calling you Emmy Amy?
Oh, shoot, that does sound pretty good.
That's a nice ring to it.
Yeah.
Or Emmy Winfrey.
Emmy Winfrey, yes.
I think Oprah probably already has the copyright on Emmy Winfrey. that belongs to her.
Oh man! Oh well.
My last question for you guys today. In this episode, BoJack says during his eulogy, and I'm paraphrasing, you never get a happy ending because there's always more show, at least until there isn't. So I have to ask, is there an end game in planned for BoJack Horseman, whether it's a happy one or not? Or are you just going to kind of ride this as long as you can?
Yeah, I think you'll have to keep watching. I think life doesn't necessarily have an end game. I mean, it's always been my vision of this show that, we would keep working on it as long as it was interesting or as long as we felt like we had stories to tell. And we're not necessarily driving towards one specific end point. This isn't like a Breaking Bad where it is like, the rise and fall of a single guy or the specific arc we've been telling all along. I think the show exists like life exists, and sometimes things might stop abruptly or sometimes things might slowly fade out. And I think it kind of depends where we're at when the show ends, where we'll leave the characters. And I think you'll have to keep watching to find out when that is.
All right. That's a fantastic tease. Thank you guys so much for taking time out to talk to me today, and best of luck with the awards coming up.
What a pleasure. What a treat.
Thanks again.